Welcome to the Cold Case Christianity broadcast, the only Christian case-making program hosted by a cold case homicide detective. J. Warner Wallace has been investigating cold case murders in Los Angeles County for over a decade. His work has been featured on Fox News, Court TV, and Dateline. For more information about Jim's work and the case for Christianity, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. Now, here's your host, J. Warner Wallace.
Thanks for joining us at Cold Case Christianity. I'm J. Warner Wallace. You're joining us now for the beginning of our 6th season of our television show at NRBtv, and I appreciate all of you who have kind of watched our episodes, and I think it's crazy that I've been able to develop a TV show from what was really originally just a podcast that now we are broadcasting on NRBtv. And this season, season 6, I want to do something that is more focused for young people. And you might think, well, look, I'm not a young person. I'm not a high schooler or a college-age student. I get it. Obviously, I'm not either. But I do think we have a responsibility to young people, a responsibility that ought to transcend our own age demographic. Look, I talk about it this way. When you were younger and you had your own kids, or maybe you're in that situation now, I remember parenting my kids. There was a season in which I didn't get to pick any particular restaurant I wanted to go eat at. I had to go eat at the restaurants that were going to be really better for our kids and maybe that were more affordable for a family. I didn't get to pick the movie I wanted to watch. I made a sacrifice and watched whatever was good for the kids. We didn't pick the vacations we wanted to take. We worked and picked those vacations that were actually better for the kids. In other words, there's a season in which all of us understand as parents that we have to make sacrifices for our kids, and we do that, and we're happy to do that. We have kids in the church. They're part of our family. They may not be your biological children, but they are your kids. And just as there is a season of raising young people in which we need to make sacrifices as the older people, there's a season for us, you and I, in which we have to make sacrifices. And are we willing to do it? That is really the question. Are we willing to do it? So what we're going to talk about in the next few weeks of the beginning of season 6 is we're just going to talk about those things that I think are powerful and will help us to raise up the next generation of Christians. And why is this important? Well, I think you know why it's important. It's important because we have a mass exodus of young people from the church. And this probably has been going on for some time, but it does seem to be more and more acute right now, given the nature of the generation in which we live, in which the information age is available to all of us, and the kind of information that's available online is available to all of us. And what that basically means for us is that our young people are going to be experiencing something that we never experienced as older people. We never experienced the kind of information overload, the number of choices, a more relativistic world in which young people have autonomy, and that autonomy online has changed the way they behave. I want you to think about that for a second. The autonomy that young people have online is greatly multiplied compared to my generation, in which if you wanted to watch a TV show, you couldn't pick when you wanted to watch it on demand, at will. Instead, you had to watch when it was being scheduled. Have you noticed the transition from, say, cable networks and scheduled television programming to on-demand streaming services, in which I don't have to wait till next week to see the next episode? As a matter of fact, I don't have to wait at all. I can watch the entire season and binge watch it all in one day if I want to. This is what is accelerating a sense of autonomy and individuality for every one of our young people. They can pick the kind of media they want to watch when they want to watch it, the kind of news they want to watch when they want to watch it. In essence, they can create for themselves a micro-narrative in which they simply are living in an echo chamber of all their personal desires and wants. It's very subjective. And in that situation, in that cultural environment in which we live, would you be surprised that young people who can decide and tailor and custom make the world in which they live, including their media consumption, would also start to tailor make the God that they want to worship? And that is exactly what's happening. You will see that the number of people who are leaving the church, most of whom are younger, has coincided with a rise in people who identify with no religious affiliation. They're not saying they're atheists or agnostics. They're simply saying that in terms of all the available worldviews that are out there, I'm not interested in any of those. They've created for themselves their own version of God. As a matter of fact, if you ask those people who say they have no religious affiliation, well, do you believe in a higher power? Do you believe in a supreme being? The vast majority say yes. So they haven't stepped away from a belief in God. They just crafted a God that suits their own desires. And that shouldn't surprise us, given the technology which has just accelerated that view of the world. So what we're going to do today in our first episode of Season 6 is kind of give you an update on the loss of young people in the church, given the kind of data that we have that I think will help us to understand the attrition rate in the church. So we're going to take the opportunity, and by the way, I have put this online as a very large article that I've been tracing the statistics given surveys over the years. I'll show you the webpage right here. It is the only page on my website at coldcasechristianity.com that has the word updated in it. So if you just search for the word updated in the search bar at our website, you will find this article, Updated, Are Young People Really Leaving Christianity? And that has got a list of all of the articles, all of the surveys, all of the studies that have been done that'll help you to see what the problem really is and how we might interact with it. And today what we're going to do after the break is we're going to spend some time looking at really some of the most recent surveys in the last 12 months that'll help you understand what young people are facing and the nature of Christianity in the eyes of young people here in America. We'll do that right after the break.
Be sure to visit the Cold Case Christianity website daily to read Jim's blog, watch the weekly video, or listen to the Cold Case Christianity podcast. You'll also find great free resources, including the free downloadable monthly Bible insert. While you're there, be sure to sign up for Jim's daily Case Notes email. Cold Case Christianity is designed to help you become a better Christian casemaker.
So if we go back to this analogy, look, I knew when I walked up to this scene that this was tampered with. I wasn't just going to walk away and say, oh, well, bad accident. I knew based on the conditions that this was no accident. Make sense? In a similar way, we have a condition here that we cannot just write off as an accident. We've got both a foundational level, a unique backstory. We have a regional level at the galaxies, which is hard to ignore. And finally, we have this locational level of all these tampered, all these little... Let me show you how crazy it is. I cannot collect and list for you all of the universal constants that have to be just so in order for us to be sitting here right now listening to this. But I can kind of illustrate it this way. If you were in a cockpit of a spaceship, okay, there are a number of things that have to be just so in order for you to get to the specific destination. These are all like the constants we see in the universe that have to be finely tuned just so. All of these things have to be, if any one of these things is off by a degree in one direction or the other, you don't get to your destination. Now, you know, if you were to see a cockpit like this, you know that if you set this correctly so you can end up someplace really far away accurately, it's not an accident. It's that somebody has set all of these dials specifically to get you where you need to go. It's not an accident. And it turns out the universe is just like that. All of these coordinates have been set within a fraction to get us where we need to go, which is to a planet like ours, and more importantly, a planet in which life like ours can emerge. Does that make sense? This is why Paul Davies, who's not a believer, he's a physicist and a scientist at Arizona State University, he puts it this way: everyone agrees that the universe at least looks as if it has been designed for life. Everyone agrees on that. So how do you explain the appearance of fine-tuning? Well, it could just be there's a fine-tuner. Okay, I want to start with a study from Pine Top's Foundation last year, a study that's kind of alarming in terms of its large numbers that are predicted, but take a look at it. It says that about 35 million young people who are raised in the Christian church, raised in Christian homes, are going to depart from their faith over the next 30 years. In fact, they predict the number of young people who might be leaving the church could reach as high as 42 million. Now, I would say that that's an alarming statistic, and it ought to call us to action, right? Don't be surprised that in a generation that has autonomy, has the ability to create their own worldview, to create their own environment, to create their own media consumption, they would also be creating their own God. And they're going to be leaving the meta-narrative of Christianity for a micro-narrative of their own choosing. Okay, I get that. And it also shouldn't surprise us that that is happening simultaneous with the increase in usage of smartphones that enable this kind of media, this kind of on-demand lifestyle that we are completely in control of. It's only been exacerbated, right? But what's good about this information is that if there are now 30 to 42 million young people who have left the church, but if you ask them statistically, they still believe there's a higher power, there's a supreme being, well, we're in a good position to be able to help those young people, to point them to the thing they are seeking. Isn't it interesting that even those who say they don't have any religious affiliation, to the extent of maybe 85, 86%, if you ask it properly, if you ask it the right way, higher power, supreme being, yeah, they're in. They actually believe in those things. So we ought to know that this is a great first step toward preaching the gospel to somebody. Look, there's times when you feel like you have to start at zero. Is there any good reason to believe there's a God? And if there is a God, is it a Christian God, the God that we're talking about? Well, these are folks who actually still believe in a supreme power, and they are seeking to either replace that with one of their own invention or with some other idol, some other pursuit that is basically filling the hole that God had vacated. The point is, we are all God seekers. That kind of meaning is being sought by each and every one of us. We have a chance with this group to actually point them to the God of the Bible. Let me show you another survey, and lots of data from this one that is conducted by Lifeway. And so I'm going to show it to you. First thing they talk about is that 2/3, about 66% of American young adults who attended a Protestant church, that's what they're surveying, for at least a year as a teenager, so they are going to drop out for at least a year between the ages of 18 and 22. Now, at least a year. Now, that could be deceptive. I don't want you to get the impression that all these folks automatically come back to the church, because that's not always true. That is not always true. I want to show you some of the statistics that accompany this report, accompany this survey, so you can get a sense of what we're really talking about here. And here we go. Take a look at them. It turns out that if you look at the number of young people who said they were attending church at the age of 17, when they were with us and right before they go to college, about 69% would say they were attending at the age of 17. That drops 11% in 1 year by the time they're 18. Now they're getting a chance to make decisions on their own whether or not they want to be in church in the university setting. A year later, another 18% drop out, and by the time they are 20 plus, only about 33% are attending church regularly. Now look, this doesn't mean they're necessarily, even in this group, this statistic doesn't even necessarily mean that they are no longer even claiming a Christian identity. But let's face it, the things you love are the things you do most. So if I love football, I'm probably watching a lot of football. If I love baseball, I'm probably watching a lot of baseball. If I love God, I'm probably attending church. Or I'm doing something that connects me with the things of God. By the way, Bible reading is equally down. Christian community relationships are equally impacted. What's happening here is that there's no longer this passion or love, if there ever was, one for Christ to begin with. And that's what you see in attrition rate. Let's talk about another set of conclusions that come from this survey as well. Take a look at this. So it turns out that the 5 most frequently chosen reasons that young people give for dropping out are these. About 34% will say that I just moved to college and I was no longer attending. That's just a kind of a lazy way of saying, because if you were interested, you'd find another way to attend. You'd find a church to attend. You'd find a Christian ministry online. You'd find one on the campus. You'd find something. And now 32% say that they thought that the church members seemed judgmental or hypocritical. So that's a relational issue. 29% that they weren't feeling connected to the people in their church. That shouldn't surprise us too much, given you're going to move away and the new church you're part of, you might not feel connected to anymore. And 25%, this is one I want to talk about, disagreed with the church's stance on political or social issues. And finally, 24% said, hey, I was just working too hard. Well, I have a sense that even if someone says they're working too hard, they probably have some discretionary time that they are spending somewhere. They're just not spending it on the things of God. But let's go back to that 25% statistics related to young people who are saying, I just don't agree anymore with what the church says about hot topic issues. Culture is telling me one thing about marriage and gender and sex and all the other hot topic issues. And the church seems to be holding to a position that I just don't agree with. It doesn't seem like it's making it difficult for me to mesh these two things. Folks, I think it's going to be time for us to help young people see that the truths of the Bible, the truths of Scripture, the teaching of Jesus is a hard truth worth holding on to. But we're going to have to, number one, help them to see that it's a hard truth and that it's worth holding on to. And maybe then try to give them specific a methodology, a specific technique, specific ability, practice this ability, by the way, to hold on to the hard truth in times when it's going to be hard. Why would you be surprised? Jesus says at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are you, the hearers, us, when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say false things against you because of me. Lie about you because of me. It's not an if, it's a when. If you speak to me, if you speak to your friends what I'm speaking to you, if you just repeat the claims I am making to you, if you stand by these claims, if you begin to live these claims, oh, trust me, you are going to be persecuted and insulted and lied about. And blessed are you for that, because this is exactly what happened to the prophets who were before you. That's what Jesus says. If you're going to speak the words of God into the world of fallen humans, get ready. You're going to find a friction between those two things. And young people are seeing that. Another statistic from this poll, I want to show it to you, is that among all those who dropped out, 29% said they had really already planned on dropping out for a season, and 71% had said that was not intentional. Now, I think it may be difficult, I think, to actually measure that, right? Because you don't know, for example, if someone's just trying to cloak that a little bit. But what it appears is that people both come out of the church organically while they're younger, and then they come out organically while they're there. They may not see it coming. It may just be something that's not important enough for them to pursue. That's going to be another approach we can take with young people. How can we help them to see that this is important enough for you to pursue? That's going to be another thing we're going to have to focus on when it comes to young people. Let me give you the last kind of summaries of data from this Lifeway survey. I think they're pretty interesting. It turns out those who stayed in church gave us some good news, some information about why they stayed in church. That's helpful, right? So those few who stay, this is what they said. 56% said the church was a vital part of their relationship with God. 54% said they wanted the church to help guide their decisions in everyday life. 43% said they wanted to follow the example of a parent or other family member. 39% say they continued to attend because church activities were a big part of their life. 39% said they felt church was helping them become a better person. 37% say they were committed to the purpose and work of the church. Now, isn't that interesting? What I think is really interesting in that, I mean, a lot of it feels like, if we're not careful, that young people can kind of see the church as an organization or an institution, rather, that serves them, that somehow helps them in some way. Look at those statistics one more time. You know, it's about helping them to guide their decisions. I make better decisions if I'm here. Better activities if I'm here. I can become a better person if I'm. Those are all true outcomes of being in a church. But do you see how we're in a kind of self-help mentality or culture in which young people sometimes say the reason why I'm staying is because it does something for me. But interestingly, 43% say they stayed because they wanted to follow the example of a role model in their family, a parent or other family member. That's why it's so important for us to model Christ to young people. That's a key. Let's take a break. When we come back, I've got some better news on ways we can help keep young people in the church. We'll talk about that right after the break.
I often get asked this question, having worked a lot of criminal trials and having worked a lot with eyewitnesses on the stand as parts of larger investigations. How can you trust the eyewitness accounts we call the Gospels if eyewitness testimony is so utterly unreliable to begin with? Well, okay, there's some dispute about whether or not eyewitness testimony is unreliable, but let's just, for the sake of argument, I'll just tell you, I don't really ever trust eyewitnesses. And I often say this, I don't want to get burned by an eyewitness on the stand in a jury trial. That's the last place you want to first discover that your eyewitness has been lying to you. And many of my cases ended up on Dateline, so I certainly don't want to go on national television and find out that a witness is lying. And it can happen. So I just learned over the years, I don't trust. If you told me I can't trust an eyewitness, I'm like, yeah, no kidding. I don't trust eyewitnesses. I will never, ever start off trusting an eyewitness. Let me tell you what I do instead. I test eyewitnesses. We have a test. A test that we run in every criminal trial. It's in the jury instructions for jurors to assess eyewitnesses. Were they really there to see what they said they saw? Can they be corroborated or verified in some way? Have they changed their story over time? And finally, do they possess a bias that would cause them to lie? Now, after you have tested an eyewitness, if they pass the test, sorry, you're going to be instructed by the judge to trust them. Oh, I don't know. You know, he reminds me of my Uncle Phil, and my Uncle Phil's a liar. I can't trust this guy. He reminds me of Phil. Really? Did you test him? Well, yeah. Did he pass the test? Well, yeah. Then I'm sorry. I don't care if you don't like the way he looks. You have to trust him as an eyewitness because he passed the test. Now, I will tell you that as I looked at the Gospels, I didn't want to be a Christian, but they passed the test. And then I was stuck. If I'm going to be honest, a judge would have instructed me to trust what's being said because they passed the test. So now you know. These are the 4 ways that you're going to test an eyewitness. Were they really there to see what they said they saw? Can they be corroborated or verified in some way? Have they changed their story over time? And finally, do they possess a bias that would cause them to lie? Apply that test for yourself to the Gospels. You'll see that they pass the test.
Okay, I want to talk about a couple of surveys that have been taken over the last year or so that actually can kind of give us a better insight as to what works. Like, when people stay, why do they stay? That would be kind of helpful, don't you think? One is from the Lutheran Church in the Missouri Synod, who released a study last year. The study is called Millennials and Their Retention Since Confirmation, a survey of LCMS, Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, congregations. Here's what they discovered. Congregations reported that only 1 in 3 of young people who were confirmed between 2004 and 2006 still worship at the church today. So that's interesting. Now, look, this could be a denominational thing. This could be, but that's the bad news, right? 1 in 3. That's about the same statistics that we see in every other denomination. But interestingly, 30% of these young people left before they graduated high school. Again, a lot of young people are deciding this isn't true while they're still with us. 34% left after they graduated high school. And you can see here that in this survey, at least, it appears that it's almost the same on both sides. Those who left before and those who left after. But here's what I thought was kind of interesting. Look at this. The study also found that LCMS churches retained young believers at a much higher rate if they did these 3 things. 1, they retain their youth pastor or youth leaders over a long period of time. Remember, it's truth in the context of relationship that is so powerful. Truth in the context of relationship that is so powerful. Those relationships, if they can be retained over a long period of time, help young people. Also, 2, their church leadership was generally younger. That's interesting to me. They connected relationally because the leadership was generally younger. And really interesting, 3, their youth group is larger. I'm not quite even sure what to think of that last one. Their youth group was larger. I think there's a certain amount of passion and synergy in large youth groups, and maybe that's part of it. That young people want not just the relationship, but they want a sense of passion and engagement and excitement. Why would that surprise us? And that is probably true of larger groups. That means for us, if we want to capitalize on both of these, if you're in a youth group that is super large and exciting and energetic, but has enough adult leaders to engage people and to actually have relationships so that every person in that group is known, that's probably the best of both worlds. So, something to think about. Those are the 3 things that the Lutheran Synod discovered were actually helpful. Let me show you another survey that I think is also good. It's called Nothing Less: Engaging Kids in a Lifetime of Faith by Jenna Magruder and Ben Trueblood. Here's what they discovered. These are things that are common in all young people who stay in the church. These are the common attributes of young people who stay in the church. A child reads the Bible while growing up. Spends time in prayer while growing up, serves in the church. Oh, this is so huge. This is interesting. Listens primarily to Christian music. Oh boy, a lot of you don't even like Christian music and you would argue against it, but the reality of it is these were the attributes that they discovered in young people who stayed in the church. Here's the 5th one. Participated in church mission trips and projects. Look, these are actions. It turns out that these disciplines, the way you act out your faith, has a large impact on whether you stay in the faith. We can help that happen as parents. It turns out that being involved in a missions trip, that's huge. For a lot of young people, that is huge. They're putting feet to their faith, serving in the church while you're growing up, serving alongside a parent while you're growing up. And then being involved in the daily disciplines. It's like you're really taking care of your heart, your soul, your mind. So even the music selection is important for young people as well. But this is what I thought was even cooler. And I'm glad to end today's show really on this point. What is it? What are the attributes of parents? So if you're a parent, you got young kids in your house, and you're wondering, okay, what are the attributes of other parents who have successfully kept their young people in the faith? Well, this survey actually shows you what that is. Let's take a look at those. So these are parents who have successfully passed on their faith to their children. They're typically involved in these activities. Number one, reading the Bible several times a week. It's something they actually engage in. Taking part in a service project or church mission trip as a family. It's it's sharing your faith with unbelievers in a way that your young people are seeing it, maybe even engaged in it. It's service in the church. You can see that number 2 and number 4 are super important. Get involved in acting out your faith and putting feet to your faith. Also, just being honest and real. Young people, especially Gen Z, will want authenticity. So you got to ask for forgiveness when you mess up. Encouraging their children's unique talents and interests. Taking annual family vacations. Attending churches with teaching that emphasize what the Bible said, of course. And teaching their children to tithe. I will tell you that last one has been huge. My son Jimmy started tithing to Chuck Colson's ministry when Chuck Colson was still alive. I'm now a senior fellow at Colson Center, but Jimmy started tithing to prison ministries. He was a kid. And we might tithe in the church, he'd see us do that, but then he would tithe to prison fellowship ministry. And I thought, wow, that actually had an impact on his sense of engagement. Ownership is the key here. You'll see that several of those that I listed, let me put them back on the wall for you for a second. Several of these I've listed have everything to do with ownership. Am I willing to take part in a service project? Do I share what I believe? Am I actually acting on what I believe as a tither? So there's things in here that are really about putting feet to your faith. All right, that being said, I wanted to give you some bad news and some good news in this episode about the update, kind of an update on the condition of young people in the church today. I hope that's been helpful for you. And we'll talk more about this in the next 3 or 4 episodes here at Cold Case Christianity. Until then, join us next week at Cold Case Christianity.
Thanks for joining us at the Cold Case Christianity broadcast. If you're interested in more information about this week's topic, please visit coldcasechristianity.com. For a thorough investigation of the reliability of the New Testament Gospels and the case for Christianity, be sure to purchase Cold Case Christianity, God's Crime Scene, Forensic Faith, and Alive.